So today I have to build a brand new Pokemon TCG deck for under $5, and then I'm going to take that deck to a tournament and see how we do. This is going to be hard. So when you're trying to build a new deck, you have to look at the meta and see what are the opportunities for you to exploit, or what are the common weaknesses with the top decks that you can target. But like I said, we're in a new format right now, so I haven't got a whole lot of data to go from. Only a couple Asian events for me to look at. From those event results and Heggy Radio, I did start to see a pattern though. It was very clear that the Lost Box style decks, including Giratina V-Star, were definitely the head and shoulders of the format, and they were definitely the benchmark that we had to beat. After Lost Box decks, the Mew decks were still very popular, and Fusion Mew now seems to be a really good way to play the deck again. But then after that, I think there is a gap between the tier 2 decks such as Gardevoir, Lugia and Miraidon. So it seems to me like targeting this meta is going to be quite difficult, because decks like Lost Box and Gardevoir are polar opposites. One has 330 HP and the other one has 70. But the conclusion I did come to is that I think if you are a deck that can two-shot the heavy EX VMAX's decks like Mew and Gardevoir, but have enough HP to where you can tank hits from Lost Box, you might be onto a winner. So with that criteria in mind, I started to look at the relevant card pool, and then 3 main attackers stood out to me: Galarian Moltres, Hisuian Arcanine, and Snorlax. Galarian Moltres was the first card that really intrigued me, because with its dark typing, it has no problems one-hit KOing Gardevoirs and Mews. And with its Fiery Wrath attack, it's actually really strong into a whole ton of other 2 or maybe even 3 prize attacking decks. And with cards like Energy Retrieval and Clara, it's really easy to use in the late game. But unfortunately, it's only really good in the late game, since Fiery Wrath offers no real use in the early game. This meant I now had to test a whole suite of other early game attackers to pair with Moltres, and quite honestly, I did not have that time. But keep Moltres in mind for later. I would not be surprised to see it do well in this format. Arcanine again looks really strong though. With its fighting typing, it can one-shot Miraidons, Regieleki VMAX and Arceus. That is a good part of the meta. And against everything else, it still hits rather hard, which I like. And the nature of it being a stage 1 box with Zoroark is that you can play other attackers for other matchups, such as this Martiana for Mew, which Mew really doesn't want to deal with. But on paper, I still think the Lost Box matchup can be very dicey, and that's just something I cannot afford to have. Also, with Quick Ball and Ultra Ball rotating, I feel as if getting your hand down to 0 every time for very vulnerable could prove pretty difficult. But again, I still think this is going to be a card I keep at the back of my mind, because I think there's potential. That's all well and good, but I definitely think Snorlax seems like the most promising option. It's already seen a whole lot of high tier play in Lugia and Lost Box decks already. It's a basic attacker with 150 HP. That is obscene. Its attack also does 180 damage, which is perfect numbers for KOing all one prize Pokemon and two-shotting everything else. Exactly the criteria I was looking for. And while this doesn't have the OHKO potential like a Moltres or an Arcanine, this is so much easier to use. But it was the ability. It was the ability that made me decide to build around Snorlax. See, that on-phase fat ability means it is immune to all effects of attacks. So that means cards like Articuno cannot paralyze it, but it also means Sableye cannot place damage counters on it via Lost Mine. This makes Snorlax an absolute thorn for Lost Box to deal with. And this was way too good for me to pass up, so I decided to build around Snorlax. The next problem though, unfortunately, was how are we going to power up Snorlax? You see, we could use Mirage Gates, but then I'm just playing Lost Box. And then I remembered all the way back to Liverpool, where I got to commentate a game of Cherim Snorlax on stream. This is perfect because Cherim can power up Snorlax very easily with its ability Spring Bloom. And with Quick Ball and Evolution Incense leaving the format, a lot of other decks are really struggling for Pokemon Search. Well, in a Cherim Snorlax deck, you have Nest Ball and Level Ball. Cherim is searchable via Level Ball. This is really good. Even the Cherubi has the same ability as Snorlax, meaning Sableye cannot target it either. And Manaphy protects everything on the bench as well, while being Level Ball searchable too. So on paper, this should have a good Lost Box matchup, and by extension Giratina matchup, Mew matchup, and Lugia too. That is a terrific place to start. So I took the Liverpool list and started swapping out cards, like Training Court for Mezagoza and Twin Energy for DTE. And it worked quite well, to be fair. But I did run into another problem. Was still losing to Lost Box. The combination of low consistency and staying asleep, funnily enough, was really making it hard for me to win games. So I added Wind Up Arm to the list so Snorlax could attack while it was sleeping, which did help, to be fair, but the consistency still wasn't where I'd like it to be. I found myself in the mid game really running out of steam and really relying on Greninja, which can be a bit hit or miss. And don't get me started if a Roxanne came down. Oh my goodness. So I needed to find some sort of draw engine. The problem is Ultra Ball is way too resource intensive for this deck to use. So that immediately rules out the barrel. So that got me thinking, and I was really angry that Lipard has 100 HP because that would have been perfect for this deck since it would have been livable searchable. But then I remembered, Curlier exists, which does have 80 HP, meaning Ralts and Curlier are both levelable searchable, and with its refinement ability we can discard one card from our hand to draw 2 more. This is perfect. This instantly boosted my win percentage and I was confidently beating decks like Fusion Mew now as well. But the Lost Box matchup still wasn't exactly where I wanted it to be. But then my friend suggested that if I was playing Curlier, why don't I play Gallade too? Its buddy catch ability would allow me to always have a supporter in my hand when I wanted one. This means I can now play a single copy of Roxanne to really stick it to Lost Box in the late game. And this really closed the door on Lost Box and put the matchup exactly where I wanted it. So the next matchup I wanted to try was against Gardevoir, and this matchup was pretty dreadful since they would tank a hit with one Gardevoir EX, retreat to the bench, and then I would have no way of getting that KO later on. So that means I did have to swap the Serenas for Boss's orders, and then it was about 50-50, so I'll take that. After that I tested against Lugia and Mew, and the matchup seemed to be winnable, which is what I wanted. So here is the final list, and I'm very happy with it, and here is the total price of this deck that you can see on screen, prices from Card Market. We have good matchups versus Mew, Lugia, Lost Box and Giratina, and bad matchups versus decks like Dialga, Miraidon and Duraludon. Although in theory any deck that can heal damage and tank hits we really do not want to play against, because this deck relies on prize trading to win, and if our opponent can remove damage that's going to really set us back. So cards like Goodra are really not very good, or cards like Hyper Potion, Penny, Cherim's Care, anything like that we do not want to see. So with that I sleeved up my deck, thank you Dragon Shield, link in the description, and headed off to my local event. So at this local event we had 4 rounds again. So I was trying to aim for a 3-1 record. My first round was against good friend Corey Kirkham, who is a world level player, no might I say, and a good friend of mine. He was playing Lost Box. Unfortunately for him, game 1 he didn't draw very well, so I managed to creep it out. And game 2 was a much more close affair. But Gallade came in super clutch with the buddy catch for Roxanne play like I mentioned earlier, and this pretty much closed the door for Corey to win, and I ended up getting the W. So I started off 1-0. Round 2 however was a different story. Since this was the 31st of March, the day Scarlet Violet came out, the TO didn't want to make it solely a post-rotation event. So players could play post-rotation decks or pre-rotation decks too. This meant my round 2 opponent was playing something I really didn't want to see. Arc Duraludon with a 2-2 Goodra line. And that Goodra really stuck it to me silly, with Moisture Star completely healing off damage and Rolling Eye making my total damage 80 for Thumping Snore. So I lost that one, although game 1 was pretty close. So I'm currently 1 win, 1 loss. My round 3 opponent was playing post-rotation Lugia, and I was really excited to see how this matchup would go. Game 1 he dead drew pretty bad, but game 2 was so close. It came down to Tyranitar milling away too many energy with Single Strike Crush, leaving him with not enough energy to attack in the late game. But I didn't have a lot of resources left either, so this game really could have went either way. But I did get the W, so I'm currently now 2-1. If I win my last round, I hit my target. But unfortunately for me, in round 4 I matched another pre-rotation deck, and this time it was Arceus Duraludon without the Goodra. But the combination of Skyscraper ability and Hyper Potions made it pretty much impossible for me to get any KOs. So unfortunately I lost and I ended up going 2-2 on the day. Despite the result though, I still think this was an amazing success. Against the 2 post-rotation decks, I did beat them both. So who knows, if I matched a post-rotation deck in my round 4, maybe I would have went 3-1. Irrespective of all that though, I am very attached to my little Cherim Snorlax deck, and I'm going to run it back soon, and hopefully we can get some more W's, baby. If you want to build your own cheap deck though, you should hit out Pokédex, link in the description. They can send you out a fully built deck that you want exactly to your standard as early as the next working day. And when that deck turns up, make sure you sleeve it up in Dragon Shield. They are second to none in my opinion.